Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I got a message in one of the groups that I'm in asking me if I would do a video on how nuclear explosions work. And I said, absolutely, you came to the right guy. I mean, after a while, we still talking about these little pea shooters here. You know, go big or go home. Okay, so the way nuclear explosions work is they depend on pressure. That's the driving force. Okay, so let's take a look at an atom bomb of the type that was used during World War II. You take a reactive material, right? Uranium or plutonium, which is derived out of uranium, or a combination of the two. So you have this reactive material that you start off with, and the reason why we're using that is because it's a lot easier to break apart, right? But we start with this material. We put this, basically, you get a spear of it, and you surround that with conventional explosives like TNT or C4 or some combination of conventional explosives. So you surround the reactive material with that, and then on the outside of that, you put a big, thick metal spear. All right, so you got this big metal sphere on the outside, and the way it works is you detonate the conventional explosives, right? You detonate that TNT, and then when the TNT, basically ignites, right? It tries to expand out. It hits the metal sphere on the outside, hits that, can't continue to expand, so it bounces back in, and as it bounces back in, it crushes down on that reactive material that's in the core, and as it crushes down, those molecules kind of get smashed together, and it starts that, as they start bouncing off each other, it creates that nuclear reaction, right? That we understand as a nuclear explosion. Okay, so that's how nuclear explosions work. They depend on pressure, right? You got to crush down on those molecules and force them, to basically force them to explode. Okay, now the question becomes, are nuclear explosions a bad thing? And the answer is no, right? In fact, nuclear explosions are a very good thing. We depend on that to live. The sun is powered by nuclear explosions. That's where we get our heat and our sunlight from. And the way that works is the sun is made out of mostly out of hydrogen gas, which is the most plentiful element in the universe. So you've got all this hydrogen, and the driving force there is gravity. Okay, because the sun is so big, you got all that gravity that's crushing down, right? And as the sun's gravity basically pulls those hydrogen molecules towards the center, they crush together, and as they basically fuse into one another, they convert into that pressure, right? Remember, pressure is the driving force here. That pressure converts them into helium, right? And during that conversion process, it releases the nuclear energy, which we understand as heat and sunlight. Okay, so again, gravity is really the driving force of the entire universe. That's what makes everything work. A lot of people, when they think of gravity, they understand that it makes the Earth rotate around the sun, makes the moon rotate around the Earth. They understand that, hey, it keeps us here standing on the ground. But what they don't understand is that gravity is what makes makes the sun do its job. All that gravity on the sun, because of all that mass, crushes down, and those molecules, basically those hydrogen molecules crush together, create that helium, release that nuclear energy, which then warms this planet and gives us sunlight. Okay, now aside from that, right, these nuclear reactions, they don't just give us sunlight and heat, but they also created all the material that's on this planet. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you take a sun, right, the size of our sun, all right, at some point, it's gonna run out of hydrogen to crush into helium, right? And then what it's going to do is going to start all that helium is going to then start crushing down on itself, and it's going to start fusing that helium into carbon, which is going to continue. It's going to continue that process a little bit longer, but at some point, you know, because at each step, right, it requires more gravity. So at some point, it's just not going to have enough mass to keep that process going. Okay, so at some point, our sun is just going to stop. This nuclear process is just going to stop. Okay, but there's other suns out there that are a lot bigger than our sun, and then what happens is on those other suns, right, that have existed in our universe, when they ran out of hydrogen, right, they started crushing that helium, and then when they ran out of helium, they started basically crushing the carbon. When they ran out of carbon, they started crushing oxygen, right? Because every time, as you go up this periodic chart, right, at each level, right, when it runs out of one element, it goes to the next one, right? It starts crushing that down, but you need more and more mass to keep this process going. So some suns out there have enough mass to keep going up the periodic chart until they get to iron. Okay, so when they keep going up the periodic chart, they get to iron. When they get to iron, basically that's where it stops. Okay, they can't go any further, and then what happens is those suns go supernova, right? And when they go supernova, the core of the sun, the center of the sun, right, which basically, you know, it basically crushes down on itself, right? The sun's immense gravity crushes down on itself, and then that creates an explosion, right? So as the core explodes, the core explodes to the outside material of the sun, and which creates even more pressure. And during that phase, where the core is exploding into the outer levels of the sun, that's where you get your heavy elements created. That's where the lead, that's where your lead and your gold and all these other. So all these elements that are created through the supernova, all right, ends up here on Earth, right? That's how we got our lead here and our gold and, you know, all these, titanium and all these other materials that are here on Earth. That all happened through gigantic nuclear explosion. So going back to what I said earlier, nuclear explosions are not a bad thing. They're actually a very good thing. It's what this universe runs on. It's the way that, we need these nuclear explosions to live on this planet. And, just because one government on this insignificant, because if you look at things on the cosmic level, right, this is a tiny planet that's pretty much insignificant when you consider the entire universe. So just because one government on a tiny insignificant planet decided to use nuclear explosions in a criminal way, right, or will consider doing criminal things, not just this government but other governments too, you can't say that nuclear explosions are bad, right? Because that's just a tiny percentage of the way that nuclear explosions have been used throughout cosmic history. Okay, so nuclear explosions are good. And again, this goes back, same thing goes back to the guns. You know, people that say that guns are bad or evil, again, they're looking at that tiny percentage of people that use guns in a criminal manner, while 99% of the 99.9% of the way guns are used is pretty much recreationally, with a small percentage being used for a self-defense purpose. Okay, so just wanted to share that with you guys. It seemed like a fun subject to discuss, but no, nuclear explosions are not a bad thing. That's the main thing to get out of here. This question comes to, how do you use these nuclear explosions, right? Are you using them in a violent way, the way that, criminals maybe use guns, right? So there's really not that much of a difference between, criminals using guns in a criminal way or criminal governments using nuclear reactions in a criminal way. It's kind of the same thing. So you can't blame, you can't say that nuclear reactions are evil when in fact it's the actions of evil governments that are at fault. Okay, so hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope this video was enjoyable for you. Drop some comments below. If you're not a member of the channel, subscribe, hit the bell button so you get notifications. I'll talk to you guys soon.